Ask some other questions, but I'll let David get on with the presentation.
Yeah, I was going to offer Scott and Leonard an opportunity to talk about how they felt the sale went.
No, as mentioned, the sale went extremely well, and fortunately, the three of our desks have worked together in past transactions, so it was pretty seamless. A lot of the buyers, you can see we all three desks knew the buyers extremely well. One up here, our particular transfer of Leadbush, we actually had a distribution agreement with them, so they were very happy to participate on the professional resale side. So all in all, the sale went extremely well.
Not to stand up here and repeat, you received a 405 all-in interest rate with a 40-year final maturity. It was a great sale. The district continues to get new investors involved. While we only had one new investor in this transaction, you've been approved by more and more investors. We look back over the last 4 or 5 years, and you just look at the spreads, and albeit spreads have tightened, you can really look at the compression of your spreads in particular to see just how well the sale of your bonds continues to go. So I think it was a great transaction overall.
Okay, that concludes the report on the sale itself. And what I'd like to do is just take another quick minute. We got 3 slides here, just to talk about where this leaves us in terms of the plan of finance, the overall big picture, long-term plan of finance. And this is going to look familiar, especially to you, Madeline, and others who have been on this committee before. So where we are is basically the same plan as we've talked about for many years, which is aiming for ideally alternate year financings to the extent that makes sense every other year, bringing into the market more bonds to address the construction needs, tying it closely with the construction program. Both the election of 2010 and the election of 2012 have $190 million in remaining authorization each. So that's $380 million of authorization that we expect to be accessible within a reasonable period of time, depending on how the assessed values grow. And so what you see here is we had the bonds that were issued in 14-15. Those are the ones that we just issued, the $135 million, and then you had the previously issued ones. And then here's sort of the plan: 16-17, another 1.25; 18-19, another 1.25; 2021, we start to get constrained there under the $48 at 4%. Now, we'll see. I mean, all of this is really depends on what actually happens to assessed values. So we'll be able to come back to you in July this year after we get the new numbers and tinker with this and show you what it looks like after one more year of actual numbers. And it could be a great number, it could be a weak number, and we look at this every year with that in mind. So you can see there's an amount here. We're projecting $28 million that is sort of stranded until much, much later. But that all could get cleaned up with a couple of more years of very strong assessed valuation growth. We don't know, but that's sort of our best estimate at the moment. So what does that look like? Well, we have graphs here for each of the elections. This is the 2012, and I have a very similar one behind it for the 2010. And again, we're assuming that the board stays for now with a target of $48, and we've assumed the same assessed valuation growth that the board and we have assumed for a period of time. We think it's conservative and reasonable at 4% a year. And so we've layered on here in these different colored bars the debt service for the different deals. So you can see the very bottom layer were the bonds. Those were the Series A bonds. Those were issued in 2013, I believe. And then the Series B bonds, I believe, are the bonds that we just issued now for this measure. And so these go out 40 years, and you can see they stair step, and they drop down when we fill up more in the back end when the Series A bonds mature. And then we're just sort of forecasting out. We assume that some sort of growth in interest rates over time, and we project out what the next issue will look like and the next issue. And then you see, by the end of the program, you really don't have much left out here because the early series have been paid off. And I think what I wanted to highlight for you here is if you take this second series that we just issued, the Series B, and you assume we didn't issue 40 years, okay? So what you'd be doing is kind of moving those bars to the left a little more. So each bar leading up, let's say you only issued 30-year bonds. You went out to 2045. You wouldn't have these green bars. So each of these green bars would be a little taller, right? You got to amortize the principal over a shorter period of time, just like in a home mortgage. So you pay a little more each year. You save, over the long run in terms of interest costs on that issue at least, but it pushes these bars up. And so what that does is if you went ahead and issued these other issues in the same amounts, assuming these interest rates, you'd end up going over the tax rate. So assuming you don't want to go over the tax rate, you would end up moving some of these bars in the later series back, and you wouldn't be able to access quite as much of these authorizations. So maybe on that prior slide where we said, there's 28 million that'll be accessed on the very back end, that number would go up. And this number in 2021, would definitely go down. And maybe some of the earlier numbers might need to go down as well, I'm not sure. But that's what's going on here. That's why we did the 40 years, especially given how low the rates were out at 40 years. But that's the game. I mean, you've got the tax rate, you've got the AV growth, and you've got interest rates. Those are the variables, and each year we look at them and decide what makes the most sense. And then here on the last page is the same picture, really, for the 2010 election. There, the bonds that we just issued here are Series C bonds because we already have issued 2 series before, but they started in 2010. But it's the same message. So I think I'm going to stop there. I see if there are any other questions, and we're available for. Thank you.
When would a taxpayer start to see a reduction in their tax bill?
Under this measure.
Is it 2045?
Yes, yeah, exactly. When you see that stair step down. So the assumption is if you continue to issue on the schedule that we've laid out, we would be going up to the $48 every year until enough bonds have been paid off where we have that significant drop. So we need some of those early bonds to pay off before we see that reduction.
Which I think is important to keep in mind since most of the voters in dual elections are older.
Sure. Yeah.
Won't be really, too many of us won't be left at that period.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you what birthday I just had, but I'm not far.
Also, are you involved in bond sales for other school districts?
Yes.
And how would you say they compare to our bond sales?
Well, I mean, I think the report is accurate that the underwriters gave. I think you performed very well. I would say you have a split rating. Okay, so you have a Moody's rating that's in the AA category, AA3, and you have a Fitch and Standard & Poor's rating that is an A+. You price more like an A+ than a AA. So if we looked at other AA credits, they're probably going to price at slightly tighter spreads or tighter spreads, and that's what we want to move beyond and get to those tighter spreads. I'll let you, Trustee, would you agree with that?
Sure, I do, absolutely. And I think all three of us work with school districts up and down the state of California. So on a A+ rated basis, I think the 405, especially for the 4 years, is quite a phenomenal interest rate to get, even in comparison to other districts. The real goal is to get the other rating agencies to look at you in the same manner that Moody's does. And that, quite frankly, is the goal that we have up and down the state of California for those districts that have a split rating. Because naturally, the investor has absolutely zero impetus to want to buy your bonds at a AA rating when they can point to 2 single A ratings. And that is the goal. I will give you a bit of an aside, and the aside is this. There is a small bit of legislation that has been promulgated by a number of different firms, including several that you have in front of you, and a particular school district, San Diego Unified, to get the Assembly and the Senate to codify what is absolutely, what all of us understand to be true, which is property taxes will pay these bills, not your general fund. If we can do that, we should be able to get the rating agencies to stop being so concerned about that and really start looking at your